The Maple Leafs make a depth move at the buzzer. Who is Connor Dewar and what can he bring to the Toronto Maple Leafs? And how did Brad Treliving do in his first trade deadline as Leafs general manager? We'll answer all of that and more on today's bonus post-deadline edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centered podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. This is a special bonus podcast episode we're doing for you guys. We figured we probably should do a quick update on what happened for the Maple Leafs at the trade deadline on Friday, and they did make one move. So if you bet on FanDuel, the over-under, it was set at 1.5, and you took the under, you won. You won yourself a bet. So the one move that the Maple Leafs and Brad Treliving made today, and it was right at the buzzer too. It came out like just before 3 p.m. that this deal was announced. Connor Dewar from the Minnesota Wild for a 2026 fourth-round pick and Leafs prospect Dmitry Ovchinnikov, who's been playing with the Marlies this season. Connor Dewar is the acquisition. He joins Ilya Lyubushkin and Joel Edmondson as the full crop of players that gets traded to Toronto that they've added here at the deadline. What can we tell the people, Dave, about Connor Dewar?
Essentially a guy that's going to bring you a better defensive presence, especially lower in your lineup. Really good on the PK. I was watching some videos. Likes to go and get those shorthanded chances and on the PK, really smart in that regard. But he is what he is, right? He's not going to be a guy that you expect to play higher up in your lineup. Not a big player by any means, but he likes to hit. He does like to throw the body around. So essentially, I think this, if you're going to look at what this is for the Leafs, this is an upgrade, I think, on Pontus Holmberg. I think they hadn't been too happy with his play lately and said we need to get someone that's going to help our PK, which has been pretty bad. Like, let's not.
Yeah, they've struggled.
I think they're the worst penalty kill amongst all teams that are qualified for the playoffs, right, or in the playoff race right now. And I think that's something that they wanted to get done, and he was the best fit in terms of what you had to pay to get it.
Yeah, I mean, a relatively low price, I suppose, a fourth-round pick and a prospect that the Maple Leafs probably did not see factoring into their team long-term. To bring in a guy who is still under team control, like he's only 24 years old, so he'll be an RFA, and they could get a couple years out of him. It's a depth add. Like, there's no other way to sugarcoat it. It's a depth add, but I think it's a good one. Ultimately, I actually do like the deal. I wasn't too familiar with him as a player, to be quite honest with you. When I first heard the name, I'm like, Dewar. I'm like, I mean, I think maybe I've seen him, but I wasn't a whole. I couldn't give you an entire spiel, I guess, right when it was done. But I looked into the numbers and I started texting some people who would know what Dewar's all about. Our friend Seth Tupel over at Locked On Wild. I asked him, hey, can you give me a quick little scouting report on a good old Connor Dewar? And this is what he had to say about the newest Maple Leafs. Said he's a great PK guy, plays some good defense, brings some good speed and a little offense too. PK will be where his biggest impact is felt. He's had 3 shorthanded goals this year, I believe. So that's a good sign. And if you believe in the J Fresh chart models that he likes to throw out there, Dewar has exceptional defensive and penalty killing numbers, both up in the high 80 percentile, 88, 87 percentile in the National Hockey League for both categories. And when I was looking into the numbers, that's what I noticed. I saw a guy that has a very sound expected goals of like 2.1 expected goals per 60. And for a guy who is used to being put in positions where he has a lot of defensive zone faceoffs. He's trusted out in Minnesota to be their kind of D zone faceoff guy, and he's been pretty successful at it. So when you only have a 34% offensive zone starts and you've got an expected goals of 2.1, usually that's pretty good. Shot suppression numbers are quite low, gives up, less than 30 shots per 60 minutes, less than 10 high danger chances. So he's a guy who is very defensively minded, which is exactly what, Brad Treliving and company kind of said that they wanted to add another depth piece to help this forward group and someone who has a little bit of grit to them, little snot. And I mean, for a guy who's only 5'10", buck 85, he's got that. You mentioned that he likes to hit a little bit. I mean, last year he recorded over 100 hits for the Minnesota Wild, had 124 hits in 81 games. This year he's got 94 hits in 57 games. So he's not afraid to throw the body around as a little guy. And he's got 10 goals in 57 games. So there's a little bit of offense that he can add to this team. And realistically, I think it'll be a decent addition. I think you bring up Pontus Holmberg as a possibility. I think that makes a lot of sense. But ultimately, even if it's just as an upgrade on Noah Gregor, it's worth upgrading on that depth regardless. And it's someone who can play down the middle. And here's another thing that I thought about. And it's funny. I was going when I was at TSN today. I ran into Frankie Corrado, and we were kind of talking about this deal a little bit. We saw it similarly, where I wonder, Dave. I wonder if this Max Domi experiment at 2C doesn't work out as well as we hope, and they have to put Tavares back up there. Does he maybe get a look at 3C? Just based on how defensively reliable that he is and how defensively reliable that he's been this year. That's just something that kind of piqued my interest and kind of percolated in my mind a little bit. Just, gives this team that little added depth down the middle.
I mean, you have to consider all your options, because I think what the last few games has shown us is that Max Domi, offensively it works, especially against certain matchups. But when you get into those playoff teams that you go up against, like the Bruins, you need better than a Max Domi as your second line center, especially if you're going to be stuck in your own zone quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll see how it shakes out, obviously, and where he fits. But ultimately, he's a bottom six player. Whether that's 3C, 4C, you chuck him on the left wing, on the fourth line. One of those spots, I'm sure, is where Connor Dewar will end up. But ultimately, I think it was a worthwhile addition. But overall, Brad Treliving, you've got Connor Dewar, you've got Joel Edmondson, and you've got Ilya Lyubushkin. Those are the three additions that Treliving made to this Leafs group this year at the deadline. How did he do, Dave? Are you satisfied? How are you feeling post-trade deadline?
Like, I understand. For me, myself, I expected not much. I didn't expect much. The Leafs cupboards are quite bare. They don't have the draft assets a lot of other teams had to go out and make a big swing. And they didn't have a lot of cap space. So I didn't have those high expectations unless he was going to make a bigger trade, which I don't think was what he had in mind. So to me, what I wish he had done, really got a top 4 right shot defenseman like a Chris Tanev, I would have. But there's only one of those guys. I don't think the market was there this year. I don't think, and I listened to Chris Johnson on Overdrive on the way home, and he was kind of right in saying there wasn't that game changer really today that you could have gone at the deadline.
That's what I think it is. And I don't, when it comes to having bare cupboards, no picks, no prospects, no cap space, I don't buy it. I think they had picks. They have their first round pick. They could have dealt. They have prospects if they wanted to deal them. I don't know about you, but I was quite surprised at how low some of these costs were for players. I mean, you look at what Thomas Hertel ended up going for in Vegas, a first round pick, and then David Enstrom, who was their first round pick a year ago. But that's pick 32. Like, we're talking about a guy who's basically a second rounder. You're telling me that the Leafs, not that they wanted to, but if they wanted to do something and bring in a Thomas Hertel to boost up this team, they couldn't have got a first round pick and, let's say, Fraser Minton, perhaps, to get a deal like that done. They could have. They could have. They chose not to. So I'm not buying they didn't have picks, prospects. They couldn't do anything. They didn't necessarily want to do anything. Now, that being said, I don't blame them either. Like, I do believe that ultimately they swang on Chris Tanev. And when they realized that was not going to happen, I don't think there was another player on the open market, just like you were saying, kind of echoing what CJ was talking about on Overdrive. I agree. There was not another player on the open market that was worth taking a swing at, that you would have been able to give up those picks and prospects. Sure, if other players were available, like Adam Larson we had talked about, but ultimately they weren't available, right? Like, those guys just weren't, out there, and they weren't being shopped. So you would have had to extremely overpay to get players like that into the lineup. And that's not where the Maple Leafs found themselves at this point in time. So ultimately, I think that they made the right decision by just going out and kind of tinkering a little bit, improving on a couple of areas. Brad Treliving, I heard his press conference with the media. He basically came out and said, their goal, although they talked about making some bigger deals, there were conversations, their first round pick was in play, but ultimately they wanted to make incremental improvements to the roster to satisfy some of the areas that need improvement. And that is, to me, he didn't flat out come out and say it. Actually, he did actually come out and kind of say this, but it was the penalty killing, and it was size and protecting the front of the net. That's what they really wanted to do. And the other stuff, they're hoping that comes from within. He challenged the rest of this group, the core four, and really said, ultimately, the play in the room will decide the Leafs outcome, right? Those guys and what they do, that's the biggest thing for the Maple Leafs. I have the quote that he said, "A lot of answers are going to come from the guys in the room." That's what he said. And it's true. Like, that's 100% the truth. Ultimately, it didn't matter if the Maple Leafs went out and got, a Toffoli today, or if they went out and they got themselves, Matt Dumba, or if they went out and grabbed another defenseman or something. Ultimately, if the core four doesn't wake up in the playoffs like they haven't over the course of their careers, doesn't matter what happens on deadline day, really. Because look at what happened last year, arguably the greatest deadline day in Leafs history, right? You look at what they did, adding Ryan O'Reilly, Nola Chari, Luke Shen, Eric Gustafson. Like, they made some big time additions, and we all said this is outstanding work. The team is better equipped. This is the best Leafs team that the Dubas era has fielded. And what had happened? Still got eliminated in the second round. And why was that? Because the big boys didn't produce when push came to shove against Florida. And that's ultimately, going to be the same case here. So it makes sense not to give up a whole bunch of futures for guys who don't really move the needle, which is what was out there and available to the Maple Leafs. So ultimately, I think Treliving made the right decision. Just a couple of fringe ads to give up in total, a couple third-round picks, a fourth-round pick, and a fifth-round pick. Look, ultimately, the odds of those picks turning into NHLers collectively is like 10%. I know third round picks, only 13% of third rounders play 100 games in the NHL. And then fourth and fifth round picks, go down from there. So the odds of those coming back to bite you, I guess, are pretty slim. And I'll take the sure thing of an Ilya Lyubushkin, a Joel Edmondson, and a Connor Dewar. And look, there's a possibility that all three of these players could even be long-term fits with this group. Potentially they like what they see out of Edmondson and Lyubushkin through the playoffs, and they decide to keep them as they look to rework this blue line. And Connor Dewar, he's an RFA. He's going to be here and potentially be part of this team moving forward. Get yourself a nice little fourth line energy, penalty killing, defensive specialist. I quite like the moves that they made. And now it's on the team, the group that's there, to get them over the hump ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, this team has been through so many changes, right? Think about what they added in the offseason with Domi, Bertuzzi. Obviously, Klingberg didn't work out. Reeves, like that. Those changes were made because they wanted to play a certain style that they
Yep.
weren't getting out, from the core four. So they said, okay, we got to bring in guys that are going to help in that area, right? Bring in more options. And look, we can talk about adding depth pieces. We've constantly said that if the top guys don't produce, because this is the way this team is built, it's just going to be just like what happened in Boston. Your best players don't play like your best players, you're not winning. It's simple
Yep.
as that,
Yep.
right? Your goaltenders can't score goals for you.
Yeah. Game 7, you see William Nylander toe dragging at the blue line. Not going to go over very well for
Nope.
you. Sorry to tell you.
So, they talk about lessons and all these things. Let's see if these lessons will start turning into, well, they'll start to take these lessons seriously,
Yeah.
right? They're being served lessons. I just don't think the students are being good students right
Now,
now.
you taking notes? Are you absorbing the information that you're being given over the course of the past few years? Great. Apply it come April. That's basically what Brad Treliving has now challenged the group to do, right? All these learned lessons, these experiences. He used the word experience a lot when he was doing the car wash, talking on the various radio stations. He said this group has a lot of experience. They need to draw from that going forward and learn from them essentially, and it's true. So again, we could talk about all these these little deals that they've made or the deals that could have been made, but ultimately we always knew that unless the team really improves from within come playoff time from the big boys, doesn't even matter. They're not going to get to where they got to get to because the way they're built is for, 3, 4, 5 players have to be at their A game come springtime, or they're not going to do a whole lot. So, but they got some supplemental pieces today, right? Or over the course of last week, they got some supplemental pieces that will help them in some areas and give them those incremental improvements that Brad Treliving said they set out to do this week. And if that was the goal, I would say mission accomplished. If the goal was to improve their penalty kill, they've done that with all 3 players that they've acquired. And if it was to improve their toughness and hard make them harder to play against, they've done that with the 3 players that they've acquired as well. So I would probably say, I don't know, maybe a B minus for Treliving. I think a B minus might be a fair grade at this point.
Yeah, I would say so. Like, it's not like if people really want to be harsh, that's fine. I don't know. Again, you can't compare what other contending teams have done and what the Leafs have done. Essentially, they solved needs that they had, plugged in holes, and they didn't give up a first. They didn't have a second to give up, really.
Well, let me also ask you this, Dave. Let me ask you this. And look, I know we're locked on Leafs and we're supposed to, be very excited and giddy about what this team could do. But if you had a gun to your head today and I said, who wins, Leafs or Boston, a 7-game series? Who are you taking?
You're asking me today, it's Boston.
Leafs or Panthers, 7-game series, who you taking?
Probably the Panthers.
Leafs or Rangers, 7-game series, who you taking?
You know what? I'm closer on the Leafs in this one than I am with
Closer, but gun to your head?
gun to head. I'll go Leafs.
You will go Leafs
I
over
will
the
go
Rangers.
Leafs.
Interesting. Okay. So that scenario only happens if they fall like
Right.
way out of it and they end up having to do the crossover for the wild card. But odds are it's going to be either Florida or Boston. And if you don't have much confidence that they can win that, why bother giving up, the Mintons or the first round picks
Exactly.
anyway? And for that reason, for kind of knowing that this might not be the year and not wasting assets, I think Treliving deserves a little bit of um, credibility for that, or just credit for that, not credibility, but just a little bit of credit for that. Just kind of being aware, self awareness that, hey, the group might not be able to get over a hump this year. Let's not blow our load on, bringing in pieces that won't get it done, losing first round picks, losing prospects. this summer is going to be interesting. There's a decent amount of cap space that's being made available. They'll be able to rework that back end and really maybe go for it next year. And hey, they could use that pick at the draft and make a splash and make a trade to improve that blue line at the draft. Doesn't mean they have to make the selection either. So now they keep that in their back pocket to make additional trades and moves, at the draft or later in the offseason. But overall, that's it, right? This is the group. This is the team moving forward, and we'll see what they got. There's 19 games left. Game 1 of 19s tomorrow night against the Montreal Canadiens. I know Joel Edmondson will be in the lineup. He's going to be in attendance. Unsure about Dewar. I would imagine that he would be able to get down there. He's a Canadian, so it's not like visa issues will be a problem for him. He's from Manitoba. Yep. So I would assume that, he should be in the lineup as well. If not, I will see him in the next game. But next 19 games, I think the point for the Maple Leafs is to figure out, how these deep pairings are going to work. They got to figure out what goaltender is going to start them game 1, who they feel most comfortable with, and, who's going to carve out those rules and earn Keefe's trust in the bottom 6. Those are kind of the 3 things that I think you got to figure out over the final 19 games for the Maple Leafs before we get to the playoffs. All right, buddy. We'll leave it there. Just a quick, short 20-minute pod just to kind of, break down what happened over the course of the last week and where we think the Leafs are at post-trade deadline. Let us know your thoughts below. How did you think the team did? What grade would you give Brad Treliving for his first deadline as Maple Leafs GM? That'll do it for us here today on the pod. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs, and leave a like and a comment down below. We're still on our road to 5K. Trying to get to 5K followers, subscribers on YouTube. We are, 275 away, give or take.
About that, 270.
Yeah, we're not far. We're not far. Just got to keep subbing up if you haven't already. If you haven't already, subscribe and be along for the ride for the final 19 and hopefully a long playoff run. We'll see. Enjoy the game tomorrow. Leafs, Habs, go Leafs, go. We'll be back with another episode for you guys on Monday. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.